My name is Danielle, and I'm going to be starting the presentation of this assignment, and then my partner will take over a little later. So just to begin, I'm going to touch a little bit on each of the movies so that we know what was going on and compare a little bit to our previous movies. So the first movie we watched was Beloved, made in 1998, and then 12 Years a Slave, made in 2013, and lastly, Birth of a Nation, made in 2016. So it's the newer version, not the old one, which we had watched previously. Something to note is that in these films, we are shown the real aspect and idea of slavery. We are shown the aggressive nature, the brutality. We aren't shown the happy, friendly slaves like in Birth of a Nation and Gone with the Wind. Given those movies were made a little after the Civil War had ended, so obviously the idea of slavery has changed since then. Moving on from there, we have Beloved, which is a movie about a family who is in the after effects of slavery. So they are free at this point, and we are seeing how the slavery had affected them mentally, physically, and all of that. 12 Years a Slave, we have a man who was kidnapped. He was free and taken to the South and sold as a slave. And we see him meet people, sometimes people who are nice and friendly and are helping him, and we are just seeing him survive the situation he is being put in. And then in A Birth of a Nation, we are shown an enslaved Baptist preacher who has basically had enough of the torment and torture of slavery in his situation and decides to hold a rebellion to go on from there. So I'm going to talk about Beloved first, and then my partner will take over. So for Beloved, as you can see, it says it's an abusive institution. We can see the physical abuse, then later we see more of a psychological abuse type situation and the effects of that. And obviously this movie is focused more on the psychological after effects rather than physical, but that is still a part of it. Most of this effects and like the abusiveness that we are shown is shown in flashbacks, so it is current time period for them and they are free, so we are shown from the memory and her remembering her being Sethe, the mother. And some of it we are shown the imagery of it. We are shown just, there's some imagery that I'll talk about a little bit later. I won't get into that right now. So the main idea of this movie is it's really focused on the psychological after effects of slavery and how it affects you mentally. So one of the first scenes we are shown is in flashbacks. We are shown Sethe being sexually assaulted by a group of men, and in that scene, we are also shown a man being lynched, is what I take to be lynching. I don't know for sure, but he is being burned, and I believe that is a form of lynching. And then in a little bit after that, we are shown a man in like a torture device. It's like a chain type thing with hooks on it. So obviously seeing that can really mess up somebody's mind. But something we can see the psychological effects on Sethe from this event because of how she talks about it and how she's describing it. You can see the anger, you can see the aggressiveness, and it's still with her even to this day, years after it happened. The next thing in a flashback we are shown is Amy helping Sethe after she has escaped and is injured. Amy is a white woman who had no reason to help Sethe but decided it was the right thing to do, and she decided to. And to me, that shows more of the changing of the time in reality, because it's showing that just because you look a certain way or you do this or you are this doesn't mean we have to interact with each other in the way that somebody is superior to the other. And another thing that Ishi's represents is just helping somebody in need, no matter what. She knows that Sethe has run away from something, and yet she is still willing to help her. And it's shown when she helps with the baby. She even tries to get her on a boat to help her get across the lake. It's really just a good way to show that, you know, we don't need to be aggressive towards another. We can coexist. Um, After that, we are shown a scene of a group of white men coming up to Seth's house after she has made it home and is being. I think she's free for maybe a couple months or something like that. It's not very clear. But we see her children just kind of hanging around and like enjoying life. And then we see this group of men come up, and she immediately runs to what we think is to hide because they're afraid that they're going to be taken back into slavery. And that makes sense. But then we see later that she actually decided that instead of just hiding, I'm going to try to kill my children because I don't want them to endure what I did. And the fact that she thought that that was the best way to handle it can really show the psychological and mental effect, because if slavery was that bad for her and the fear was so strong that she thought the only way to save my children from this is to kill them, that's it's really a lot, and it obviously takes a lot of mental energy just to kill somebody, let alone a child that is yours. Like that, I couldn't even imagine that kind of thing, but obviously she thought in that scenario it was the best choice. Um, and then the man seeing that called her an animal, which I think is ironic because they're the real animals treating people that poorly, and yet she does something that she thinks will help, and they just overlook it and think, oh, you're an animal because you did that. And yet she was like, I'm going to save my children from the heart and horror that I had to endure in those years. Um, the next thing that I want to talk about is Beloved in general. She, to me, is more of an image slash representation of the fact that whatever happened in your past really never leaves. So what the decision that Sethe made about her children um, is there within the idea of Beloved. We know she's not there because we know that she killed her. Yet there she is, flesh and bone, kind of in their house, eating, talking, all that kind of thing. And it really does show that even though she is physical, because we know that she's eating and talking and that kind of thing, um, it really is just the psychological and mental instability of Sethe and the people, like projecting that to be the personification of their past and that horror that they had to endure. Um, what I'm talking about is we know that it's more psychological is because in the end we see that Beloved disappears and just doesn't come back for the rest of the movie, and we know that she's not there, so we know that that is the ghost that the movie is referring to, and it's just their past haunting them. And it really just infers the fact that, it infers and then really solidifies the fact that no matter what happened in your past, no matter how far away you get from it, how far you think that it's not there, it is still there with you. Whether it's good, whether it's bad, it's there. And we can really see the psychological toll that it takes on Sethe because after Beloved disappears, she starts to mentally unravel and just deteriorate. So much so that it eventually turns into more of a physical ailment, and she starts to be physically ill. We see it towards the end, and I think at the very end of the film, that she has been in bed, and we can see that she's very pale, she's very weak, and that choice and that slavery and the stuff that happened really did take that toll on her, so much so that it started to affect her physically. But it's very interesting because with this film, it's slavery is portrayed very accurately, and it doesn't shy away from the graphic, aggressive nature, um, but it it does show the negative impact that it did have and does have on uh, non-enslaved people anymore, so free people. And even though they may have been free, they still have to deal with the physical toll, the psychological toll, and then not to and also mentioning the fact that when they're free, they don't have anything, so they have to build themselves up from the ground. They have to find a house, find food, find a clothing, find support, and they were lucky enough to have it before they ran away and were non-slaves anymore. So they were lucky to be put in that situation. Not extremely lucky because of we see how the house looks and that kind of thing, but it does show the trials of after slavery. Is that these people had nothing when they left, and yet they were able to survive and still exist, but they still had to deal with the psychological and physical tolls that followed them that you really cannot shake. Um, and then I'll have my partner talk about 12 Years a Slave and The Birth of a Nation, but that's all I have for Beloved.